Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Boy, this has been a really busy week. There's so much that's going on. We've spoken about these. We're going to talk about these comments made by Ambassador Ken Salazar, that comments that we mentioned at the top of the show, where he expressed concern in regards to Mexico's security strategy of abrazos y no balazos. But also this week, as you know, Moody's basically came out and modified its perspective as to Mexico's sovereign debt. And it's not good. I mean, it expressed preoccupation, but in part it has to do with many decisions that have been made in the last 4.5 weeks. Can you believe it? The President Claudia Sheinbaum has also only been in power for 6 weeks. And one of the issues that is constantly being mentioned, it's mentioned by Moody's in its press release, but it's also mentioned by other analysts and economists, is this reform where basically all judges in Mexico will eventually be elected. It will be popular elections. It's like voting for a mayor or voting for president. And this has just created a lot of anxieties, and it's been up and down. We didn't speak about this last week, but clearly it seems to be moving forward, and I'm trying to understand, what will be the next steps, not only of the Mexican government, the legislative branch, and even the judicial branch, who will have the responsibility of selecting the candidates, but what's going to happen with the National Elections Institute, INE. Will they be able to do this? And will they be able to do this correctly? Joining us today is one of Mexico's experts on elections. He's been joining us throughout the years, Benito, Professor Benito Nacif. He was a counselor, he was a commissioner at the Federal Electoral Institute a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, is that right? But is a professor, teaches elections, politics, and he's joining us once again today. Benito, welcome to the show. I know we've spoke about this a couple weeks ago. I'm just trying to get an update as to where this is going, especially with this document and literally warning that was published by Moody's. Could you just put into context, where is this process, this decision to now elect judges? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ana Maria. Thank you for the honor of the invitation. But there's been a few developments in the last couple of weeks. One of them is that that INE approved a preliminary budget that was presented to the Chamber of Deputies for the special extraordinary electoral process for the judicial power, federal judicial power, and the bill is something around 13 billion pesos. That's
wow.
A lot of money.
How much is that? 13? That's a lot of money.
Yeah. And
is that how much did the how much does presidential elections cost?
About the same, because they're basically updating the figures that of the budget for the presidential elections that took place in June, and they're basically making the same assumptions because they have to set up more than 170,000 polling stations all over the country. I mean, this is a national election. And it's very expensive. I think everybody was surprised about the figure that INE revealed,
Mhm.
Immediate reaction from President Sheinbaum was, no
She was
way.
mad. She said, no
It
way.
was,
She was
absolutely.
mad. She was like, how dare you ask for
Exactly,
this? Yeah.
exactly.
Do
So
you
the
think?
information that I have is that INE is now considering making uh, considering adjustments to the original budget proposal. And basically, the only way you can reduce the cost of an election is by reducing the number of polling stations that you set up.
Mhm.
Uh, so instead of uh, the usual polling stations that uh, Mexicans are familiar with, they are going to set up um, um, polling centers. That's the way they call it.
Mhm.
That means that they're going to reduce the number of polling stations by about half.
Mhm.
So they assume that that is going to reduce the budget of these judicial elections
Mhm.
by about 40%. So, and uh, that's what they are going to uh, lobby with Congress, a
Mhm.
reduction in the original budget. If they don't have the 13 billion pesos, uh, well, they can reduce it by 40%.
So let me ask you this. At the end of the day,
Mhm.
it is the person who presides the National Electoral Institute, Ms. Tadei, who
Mhm.
has to basically certify that she can guarantee that elections can take place next year. And it doesn't sound like there is no guarantee, even if they were provided with the money. There's just so many issues that have not been resolved. Do you understand how this election is going to take place, or how people are going to vote on the ballot? I mean, let's just talk about the voting part first, because then there's this whole debacle about how they're going to select the candidates. But how will this how will it take place? I mean, there's going to be a campaign to remind people there's elections. Can the candidates speak on radio, TV? I mean, I just don't know how do you do this?
Well, I mean, these elections are highly regulated. There are many, many things that candidates um, cannot do. They
Mhm.
cannot be financed by um, private sources. The
Mhm.
only way they can finance their campaigns is with their own money, um, and they supposedly have access to official times in radio and TV, but I mean, there is not enough time for every one of them. So basically, what INE is going to do is set up a web page for each individual candidate
Right.
and use the official time in radio and TV to invite the audience to visit these web pages where they can learn about the candidates.
Mhm.
Uh, It'll be interesting to see if this actually happens in any significant degree, but I'm very skeptical about that. Basically, the names that are going to appeal on the ballot
Mhm.
are going to be are going to say nothing to the
To the
voters,
voters, yeah.
and
It's
it's going to be um, a blind ballot or something like that.
can I ask you this? What do these ballots look like? Because the three powers, the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch are each going to present their candidates. What does this look like? Does for each spot there is going to be 30 persons or three people, each one that represents? I mean, I'm just trying to understand how do people vote, or what are they voting for? Are they just basically voting for a group of spots that are available? I mean, what do you have any sense what this looks like? I mean, is there going to be like a long
I haven't seen the
list?
ballots, but people I haven't spoken to told me that there are going to be 6 ballots.
Mhm.
We're going to have 3 national elections,
Mhm.
and 1 ballot for each national election, which is Supreme Judges,
Supreme
4
Court
ballots,
justices.
Supreme
Right.
Justices. We're going to have an election for discipline magistrates.
Mhm.
That's the second national election. And
Mhm.
we're going to have elections for 2 electoral magistrates. And then we are going to have elections at the electoral federal circumscription level
Mhm.
for local electoral magistrates. So
Mhm.
that's going to be the 4th ballot.
Mhm.
And this is within federal electoral circumscriptions. And then we are going to have elections for district judges,
Mhm.
and then magistrates of appeal,
Mhm.
and magistrates of that I don't know. We call them in Spanish tribunales colegiados de circuit collegial magistrates or something like that.
But does that mean for each one of these ballots, there's going to be like hundreds of people from which you can
Yes.
choose from? Okay.
The number is very large, depending on whether you live in Mexico City, for instance. You're going to be choosing among more than 500 candidates.
For how many spots, for example?
For I don't know exactly, I mean, the number, but we're talking about 9 Supreme Justices, 5 magistrates of discipline,
Mhm.
2 electoral magistrates,
Mhm.
and 3 electoral local magistrates and things like that. So some ballots are going to be full of, I mean, you're going to have lots of names on it, especially for candidates to a district judges, for instance. That's
Mhm.
the largest number of candidates that you're going to face on the ballot.
Today's guest is Benito Nacif, and you're giving me a headache, Benito, just telling me and
Yes.
describe,
This is all very complicated, even for
I
us.
just cannot, and you're the expert. I mean, you did
Yeah.
this, you presided, and you're a part of many elections in national elections in Mexico. Let me ask you one last question, because literally we're running out of time. Is this going to happen? Do you think is there any way to stop this? Is there any resource or any appeals or any way that they could postpone the elections? Because if my understanding, if they don't start preparing for these elections like in the next week and a half, that's it. They're just physically, or it's just procedurally, it's almost going to be impossible for this to take place. I mean, just imagine the amount of ballots and names that they have to try to figure out and choose the candidates. Is there any way of postponing this at least for a year?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's constitutional law It's established in a transitory article of the Constitution. So there is no way they can postpone it. I mean, some officials at INE are talking about it, but I don't think that Congress is going to reform the Constitution again in order to postpone these elections. So one way or another, it's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for giving me, and I'm sure many of our listeners, a profound headache. Just trying to imagine this. I just can't. I can't. If it happens, I will be surprised. It just seems almost impossible. I'm glad I'm not in the shoes of the colleagues at the National Electoral Institute. Benito
They're definitely
Nacif,
having a very hard time right now.
I can imagine. Dr. Benito Nacif, once again, professor at CIDE, former commissioner at the National Electoral Institute, or fellow Electoral Institute at the time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ana Maria.
Thank you. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. You're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Please don't go away. I'll be right back.